Yeah, I think it's pretty obvious that free speech is the bedrock of democracy, and if you lack free speech, it's impossible to have a proper democratic process because people are not aware of the facts. So, well, they may be misled. So, uh, people have to be able to speak their mind within the context of the law, and without that, you don't have a real democracy.
Yeah, so specifically then regarding the Irish context, what was it that made you sit up and take an interest in the Irish hate speech bill specifically? Because of course you've focused on issues of censorship at a big international level when it comes to big tech and things in superpowers like America. It seems unusual but welcome that somebody of your stature, shall we say, would focus on a bill in a country like Ireland.
Yeah. Well, generally, you want to be concerned about anything that any terminology that could fit in a George Orwell novel, and they're not going to. These bills will generally be named in ways that sound innocuous and sound like, sure, why wouldn't anyone support that? But when you look at the details, it's often the opposite of what the title of the bill is. So, um, if or it's disingenuous. So, if the government is given uh, broad powers to define what hate speech is, um, they can easily define things that support the ruling party. Define hate speech as anything that doesn't support the ruling party effectively. Um, so it is a way for whoever's in charge to cement their power.
Well, I think on that, there's probably many people from abroad who aren't aware of the situation here in Ireland. But for those who might not know, the government here is currently trying to pass a piece of legislation which would criminalize incitement to hatred or expressions that could incite hatred. But you're talking about a piece of legislation that doesn't even define the word hatred. When you look at the text of the bill, it says that hatred means hatred on the basis of X, Y, and Z characteristic, which is obviously a circular definition. So it's incredibly vague and ambiguous to the point where it could potentially be applied to almost any view that somebody could express. And this is what many critics of the bill have been saying for some time, that it kind of it opens the whole of discourse up to legal scrutiny potentially, where you could be prosecuted for expressing almost anything hypothetically. Um,
Yeah, I mean,
on that,
my
sorry, go
understanding
ahead.
of it is that it. I mean, it's so extreme that you could be put in prison for having the wrong meme on your phone, um, and that's insane.
Well, on that, when you first started tweeting about this legislation a few months ago, you seemed to indicate that your company X might challenge the bill in court. And in response, our Taoiseach, which is like the Irish Prime Minister, Leo Varadkar, he dismissed your suggestion and he said that you need to have legal standing to do that. And he said, and I quote, "I suspect he doesn't know what he means and is just showboating." So now that I have you here, is the Irish Taoiseach correct? Were you just showboating, or do you intend to challenge this bill if it becomes law?
Well, our default approach is to challenge any legislation that infringes upon the people's ability to say what they want to say. So, and we obviously have standing since our European headquarters are in Ireland. So we have a big office in Ireland, a big major presence in Ireland. So we obviously have standing. Um, and and we will also fund the legal fees of the Irish citizens that want to challenge the bill as well. So we'll make sure that if there's an attempt to suppress the voice of the Irish people, that we do our absolute best to defend the people of Ireland and their ability to speak their mind.
So on that, you obviously mentioned that X's headquarters in Europe is based in Ireland, and so that naturally raises the question of a kind of I mean, previously it would have been the Twitter files. Now I suppose it'd be the X files. The potential of delving into some of the correspondence that Twitter would have had with European and Irish government officials throughout periods like the COVID pandemic, for example, because there's been a lot of suggestion that things like so-called misinformation and disinformation labeling systems might not have always been used to the standard that one would hope they would be used to by authorities in terms of how they choose to label certain pieces of information. And so many people have speculated that there's a lot of potentially shocking material in there that's just waiting to be found. Would you be open to doing an X Files type project here in Ireland specifically and Europe more broadly?
Yeah, sure. But it's a pretty safe bet that whatever we found in the U.S. files will be the same in Europe. So there was massive government interference in the U.S. Now the U.S. Actually has a constitutional amendment that prohibits the government from attacking free speech. It's literally the First Amendment is the free speech amendment to the Constitution. So it is actually fully legal for the government to impede the free speech of the people in the U.S. Now, Ireland and very few other countries do not have such an amendment. Um, so it may not be illegal actually. What was done in Ireland, but what was there? Obviously, was there an attempt to suppress free speech during COVID? You can pretty much assume that to be 100% likely. Um, so I would seriously doubt that it's any different from the U.S. Um, yeah, I mean, we do want to sort of move on, and not be constantly dredging up things from old Twitter. Fight the battles of today and tomorrow, not the battles of yesterday. Um, but as you mentioned, like the thing we should be concerned about is if the Irish Parliament passes a bill that defines hate speech as whatever they think hate speech is, people should be extremely concerned about that. Um, you're just at the mercy of the ruling party and whatever bureaucrats they put in place, and they can just define something that really is not hate speech as hate speech just because they don't like it.
On that, there's been something that has been used similarly as far as vague concepts that can sort of be applied to any context, and that's misinformation and disinformation. We hear about this a lot, and in fact, under the EU Digital Services Act here in Ireland, we have a new body, the Media Commission, and we've also got the Electoral Commission, and these bodies, I think many countries now have them in Europe and North America and Australia and so on, where we're developing these bodies that have the legal authority to shut down information that they deem to be false at any given moment at an election time or whatever it might be. And in fact, we even had one Supreme Court judge who's a member of one of these bodies who said that it's important to balance the right to free speech with the right not to be misinformed. Now, I'm not aware I'm not aware of any such right in the Irish Constitution, but who am I to contradict a Supreme Court judge? Do you believe that there is a right to not be misinformed, as that judge told us?
Well, that may sound nice on the surface, but who is deciding what is misinformation and disinformation? The point is to have an open and clear debate, and if something is mis or disinformation, then to provide a rebuttal, that's the best way is open debate. And obviously, we've got community notes on the X platform, which I think is very powerful for addressing inaccuracies or adding context. And of course, when somebody posts something, people can reply with, that it's not true for the following reasons. Whereas, say something that a newspaper publishes, there's no community notes, there's no ability to rebut the claims in an article in a newspaper. So the newspapers can publish, and they do publish all sorts of things that are completely untrue. um, as well as to avoid subjects that they decide they don't want to write about. The biggest lie in the media is the choice of narrative, because they can simply ignore anything they don't like, and they can overly focus on things that they do want to talk about. So, whereas I think the choice of what to talk about, the choice of narrative, should be up to the people, not up to a handful of editors.
Um, how do you respond to critics who say that X has helped to spread misinformation about controversial situations, like, for example, the current war in Israel and Palestine, or the Ukraine situation? But because obviously, I mean, the old quote is the first casualty of war is truth, and propaganda is always omnidirectional on every side, and it's almost impossible, it seems, as an ordinary person to figure out what's going on. How do you respond to people who would criticize your platform or social media platforms in general on that basis?
Well, first of all, I think actually X has the most up to date information by far. Um, like, as I said earlier, you can rebut anything that's said any claims. So if somebody makes a post, you can reply to that post with a rebuttal instantly. There's community notes, which is very rigorous, and the way that community notes works is that people who historically have had different opinions must agree on a note in order for that note to be shown. That's a very important and I think very powerful principle. If people who have historically disagreed do both all agree that that a given community note is correct, that's what's required for it to show up. So I think it's an incredibly powerful force for truth, um, and I think it's by far more accurate than any newspaper or traditional media. Um, and if somebody is saying that there's mis and disinformation, whenever I ask them for examples, they can never produce any. And so I would say that they're lying when they say that. They're either lying or they don't know what they're talking about. They're fools or liars, or
Well,
both.
it's interesting that when you actually look at the definition of a word like disinformation, it is synonymous with a lie. So really,
No, yes,
when
exactly.
politicians say they want to regulate disinformation, we're talking about allowing politicians to regulate lying, which is, if they were to phrase it that way, I think people would have a very different reaction to it as far as policies go.
Yes. Do you want liars defining what lying is?
Doesn't seem like
I mean,
the
politicians
wisest
lie all
approach.
the time. Everyone knows that. So, they're constantly being deceptive. So, it would be absurd for known liars to define what lying is.
On that, because you are somebody who obviously is you're known for, I suppose, environmentalism in terms of electric cars and this sort of space. So when it comes to Ireland's green policies, you've criticised the energy policies of other European countries like Germany previously, and now Ireland has gone a very similar route, to the point where our national grid operator, EirGrid, says that we're going to have electricity shortages every winter for years into the future. And this seems like a big deal, but considering the fact that Ireland is home to so many data centers and tech companies and so on, you would think that as sort of the Silicon Valley of Europe, you would want to have a secure energy grid. So, as somebody with a tech company based in Ireland, with yourself and other European countries, are you worried about the direction of the Irish energy sector and the European energy sector more broadly?
Well, I think we've gone. I certainly consider myself an environmentalist, and I think it's hard to say that there's any single person who's done more to help sustainable energy and the environment than I have. So I speak with some authority and knowledge in this area. There's absolutely no need to do anything to farming. Changing farming will have no effect on the environment. Um, it's totally fine. Stop attacking the farmers. They can just keep doing they can keep doing what they're doing. There's only one thing that really matters with respect to the environment, and that is how many billions of tons of CO2 do we take out of the ground and put into the atmosphere. So it stands to reason that if you take enough tonnage of CO2 from hydrocarbons that's buried deep underground, and you take it from deep underground and put it in the atmosphere, that eventually you're going to have some change in the atmosphere. Now, so I do think that we want to move towards a sustainable energy economy where we limit how much carbon we take from deep underground and move to the atmosphere. But that's the only thing that matters. Methane doesn't matter. Methane decays to CO2 very quickly, so it all ends up being CO2 anyway. It really just it's fundamentally how much carbon do we take from deep underground and add to the surface cycle. That's the only thing that matters, and we can leave farmers alone. Um, and the risk, in my view, for uh, CO2 and global warming is it is meaningful in the long term, if you say sort of 50 years type of thing or more. I don't think it is a risk in the short term, but it will take a long time to transition uh, an economy that is still mostly based on hydrocarbons and transition that to sustainable energy where it's mostly wind, solar, nuclear. I'm actually a big proponent of nuclear. I think nuclear fission is fine, or hydro or geothermal. These are all sustainable, and that's it really. It's no more complicated than that. Is that we should just generally lean in the direction of a sustainable energy economy. But for sure we can leave the farmers alone. These actions that hurt farmers' ability to do farming, and I have a lot of respect for the hard work associated with farming, are completely unnecessary and will achieve nothing with respect to global warming.
So that would include things like cutting down on the number of livestock. We have a proposal here to cut the number of livestock in the country, cows, I believe, by about 200,000. You don't think that would have any positive impact on the environment?
Zero.
Okay, then.
Literally, you wouldn't even be able to measure it. And if somebody says they would be able to measure it, then I want to hear what that measurement number is. But I will bet $1 billion you won't even be able to measure it. $1 billion.
That's a bold.
Unmeasurable. That's how little the impact is.
On a related note, and I know you don't have much more time, and I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. On a related note, how would you explain the importance of birth rates to politicians who aren't even thinking about that as an issue when it comes to demographics and so on? Because you've spoken about this many times before, and the demographic crisis that's brewing for humanity. And when I asked our minister who's responsible for pensions, Heather Humphreys, about this issue and what our government is doing to address it, she not only did she confirm that they're not doing anything to address it, she almost seemed to act like it was an odd question. She didn't seem to understand the significance of it and how it might impact on things like social services going into the future and a whole range of other issues. So if you were speaking to lawmakers like her in the West, how would you explain why that issue is so critical?
Well, first of all, I think most people are still under the wrong impression that the world population is growing rapidly. It is in fact not growing rapidly, and in fact, in most countries, it is plummeting. Um, so, and with each passing year, I should say the birth rate is plummeting. And the only reason the population isn't plummeting is because people are living longer. That's it. But it's very easy to predict with demographics what the future of the world will look like, because you can say how many babies were born next year, and then you immediately know how many will be adults in 20 years. So one doesn't need to be some expert in statistics to understand what the world population will be like in 20 years. You can just look at the number of babies born, multiply that by life expectancy, and that's going to be the population over time. And what we're seeing in basically almost every country, in fact, I think maybe almost every country with an advanced economy, which is most countries basically, is that the birth rate is below replacement rate. So, and in some cases, it's half replacement rate. So, and if something's half replacement rate, that just means that there will be half as many people per generation. With each successive generation will be in half, and it's bleaker than that because the people that remain will be very old, and so you essentially a country will just turn into an old age home, um, and, and like a good ratio to look at for any given country is the ratio of um, adult diapers to baby diapers. Okay, that's the key turning point. In Japan, there were more adult diapers sold than baby diapers, I think, over 10 years ago, and their birth rate has gotten worse since then. And civilization, there's always this long-standing debate of, will civilization die with a bang or a whimper? Well, right now it's trending to die with a whimper in adult diapers, and that is an incredibly bleak scenario. How sad! I'd rather die with a bang.
Yeah, at least the
Better to
bang
die
will
with
be
a bang
cool.
than with a whimper in adult diapers.
Yeah, at least the bang will be cool. You know, big explosion or something. You
Yeah,
can walk away from it and look like an action hero as you go out.
yeah.
Um,
But
I
just being
well,
like, just dying with Alzheimer's and senile, and you can't, and in an adult diaper, that's miserable. So you know, um, yeah. So the birth rate
well,
really matters. And I'm not saying we should just expand massively, but I think we should at least keep the numbers where they are, and aim for a slight amount of population growth. That seems like a reasonable objective, as opposed to being a population free fall, which is most countries.
well, I know you have to run, and I don't want to take up any more of your time. I really appreciate all the time you've taken here. I wanted to end on a question about the Iliad, because I know you're a big fan of Homer's Iliad. You recently called it the best story ever.
That's great.
What about that story specifically do you like so much? Because I remember studying it at school, and you know it's a beautiful tale, but I'm wondering what about it did you find so intriguing?
Well, I think it's I mean, it's basically an action story, an action movie, and it's got all the elements that you'd want to see in a movie, which is, um, like the Spartan queen falls in love and leaves, and then all of you know Sparta and Greece goes to get her back. There are many heroic battles. Uh, it illustrates. I mean, it's so many of the things that we see in movies today really come from the Iliad. There's Achilles, who's this incredible warrior, but he's got a vulnerability. The classic, Achilles heel, um, and he's prone to letting his emotions get the best of him. There's the incredible scene um, where the father comes to um, get his son's head, get his son's body back, and begs Achilles uh, to get his son's body back. It's a great story, and I recommend it. I recommend the Penguin audio version, um, because it's actually meant to be spoken, not read.
Mm.
And
Um,
Penguin's audio version of the Iliad is excellent.
well, I would strongly recommend to you if you like the Iliad, any of the Irish epics like the Cattle Raid of Cooley is it's a similar genre. and they're excellent. If you like the Greek myths, you'll certainly like that as well. So that's a recommendation I can make to you. But anyway, I want to be conscious of your time, and I know you said you have to run around 5:30, so I don't want to keep you any longer. But thank you so much, Mr. Musk, for your time and for all of your thought-provoking contributions.
All right, you're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Talk soon.
If you do not want to miss anything related to Elon Musk or Tesla, make sure to like this video and subscribe. My name is Matt Postius. I became a Tesla stock investor in early 2019, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you so much for watching.